dear.
I am hot.
It's unbelievable.
Exhausted.
It's unbelievable. Look who we have here. I am so thrilled to have you sitting here with us. David Becker is here, ladies and gentlemen. Very nice. Very nice. I'm so glad we finally get to meet in person.
Yes.
We've been swapping emails.
We have, and we talked on the phone.
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly. This is, tell me about, first of all, what in the world got you to move to Germany?
Well, my mother is Dutch, and her mother was German, so my brother and I, Bruce, and our other brother, Ed, we spent a lot of time in Europe as kids.
Yeah.
So around '92, Bruce and I, as the David Becker Tribune, had toured all over America, and he said, why don't we go over to Europe for a while? It was his idea, so I said, sure. So we went to Belgium, and I stayed. He moved back to California in '96, but I've been there. I actually went to Germany, and so I've been there ever since.
So, do you speak any Deutsch?
I spreche sehr gut Deutsch, yeah, I have to, yeah, and I speak Dutch as well.
Listen to you, Kelly.
Yeah,
That was...
yeah.
I know a little German.
A klein bisschen Deutsch, yeah.
Just a smidge.
If you want to hear me in German, there's actually on YouTube, there's an interview I did on German television. It was an interview show about Batavia, and you can see little clips of me speaking German.
See, we have the name, Batavia.
It is Batavia. Yeah.
I was doing it again. We went through this before. I was
Well,
going, it's the Ohio thing.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I'm going Batavia.
Right.
You know?
Well, if you're from Ohio, it's a sack. You know.
Yeah, exactly. With a bottle of pop.
Right, ma'am. Yeah. There you go. Well, our dad's from Cleveland, so you know we were born in Cincinnati. Yeah, sure. Oh, yeah, sure.
Oh, I thought it was Cincy.
No, we inherited. We lived there, but you know, we lived in Michigan and all the in Chicago.
Oh,
but
we're right in the same sweet spot.
You got
Detroit, and then Cleveland. That's like, yeah. There we go.
Yeah.
There we go.
Oh, home week.
How funny.
Small
That's
world.
amazing.
So
That's
tell,
amazing.
what does Batavia mean?
Batavia was the capital of Indonesia for 300 years.
Okay.
The word Batavia actually comes from early on in the settlements of the tribes that lived in Europe, in northern Europe, which would be the forefathers of the Dutch and some of the Germans. There was a tribe called the Batavice, or Batavians. And that word became very synonymous in the 1600s for the Dutch explorers. So they built a ship called Batavia. And of course, when they went to Indonesia, and that became a Dutch colony, they named that the capital city, which it remained for 300 years until the war. So that's really what it symbolizes. It's, you know, the story itself of Batavia is more than just the city, but that's where the name comes from.
Interesting.
How much of the background, and let's explain a little bit more about what this CD, this is a very, very personal project, obviously.
Yeah, it's not just a CD, it's a story. It's our mother, Bruce and I's mother, she was born in Indonesia to a Dutch father and a German mother. And in 1942, actually 41, December 41, the Japanese invaded, and the Dutch had no defense because they had arms from the 1800s, and took them all into prisoner of war camps. So they spent almost 4 years in a concentration camp. And to this day, they've never got any restitution from the Japanese, never any apologies. And it's our goal through this project to bring the awareness about so that we can get the money and the clout to have a memorial built with all the names of the POWs on there. And that's what we're doing worldwide. I've had a lot of opportunities to do interviews about it, and we're going to go out this year and do more touring, performing, talking about the story, as well as performing the music. So it's a subject that a lot of people are interested in, but they don't know much about. So we need to go out as advocates and do this.
Sure. Well, you mentioned, you know, it touches so many more people than you would even imagine. I mean, you mentioned chatting with Mayor Dave. And,
yes.
Yeah,
he had somebody that he knew who his father was in the camps as well. So, I mean, there are people that I do meet, and I've been getting lots of emails from different people whose, you know, relatives were in camps and are very grateful for the opportunity. And we actually contacted the royal family in the Netherlands, and I got an email back and a letter from the Queen saying that we're not allowed...
AOL account.
Well, yeah, constitutionally they're not allowed to get involved directly, but they would give us some of the ministries in the Netherlands to help us with this. So they gave us the thumbs up, basically.
Nice.
You know, if we get that from any political powers here in America or any other country, that's going to bring us up to where we need to be. And this is a long, long project. And there's a 12-page booklet, and all the photos are original photos from the archives from my mother and my mom's mother.
Is your mom still alive?
She is, yes, she's still alive, and her best friend Edith is still alive too. They're the two main sources for me for this story. I've followed it my entire life, but they gave me lots of information.
What does she say about this? I mean,
She's very moved. I mean, you know, she thinks it's wonderful, and her friend Edith had tears in her eyes when I gave her the CD, so,
wow.
You know, it's a very, very heavy, and it's very moving because it's not just that this story, because it's a tragic story, but we're trying to do something positive with it. Sure. And I had a young girl in Austria recently who came to me, and she said, I'm so grateful that you did this CD about your grandmother and your mother, and you did this music, because it's so healing, she said. And I kind of didn't understand what she was trying to tell me, and then she rolled up her sleeves, and she had cut marks. And she said, you have inspired me with this. And she said, it's helped my life. And I was speechless.
What were the cut marks from?
She had some psychological problems and was hurting herself.
Wow.
But realized that through a story like this, she could, you know, help herself with music, and that was an inspiration for her.
Wow.
Because of what they went through. So
that's a little different payoff than checking the sales figures on iTunes. Huh?
It's not about that. You know, for me, I mean, every CD that we sell, for me, represents another block in that wall of that memorial. So, you know, people listening, if they want to buy the CD physically, it's available here in this country through abstractlogics.com, and that's with an X. Or iTunes now has it with the artwork, but you should get the artwork because the photos are incredible. Yeah. And the stories as well that are with it. So.
How much do you need to make the memorial?
Well, we need not just the money, but we need the recognition. If people talk about this, so, you know, it used to be tell two friends, they'll tell two friends. Now you can Twitter and Facebook 100 friends or 500. Just say Batavia, David Becker Tribune, and you'll know what it's referring to. It's referring to the POWs from the Netherlands who never got any recognition for their time in prison camp.
How concrete are the plans for the memorial?
Well,
I mean, do you have a place, or do you have a target?
We have a couple places in mind, but it depends upon what the Dutch government will allow us to do, or the Indonesian government. But I think where it should probably be is in Indonesia. But again, the Dutch government has to come in, and the Japanese have to come in and say, you know, we never gave any restitution, so we'll donate some money. Yeah. And we talked about coming back here and doing a concert, and that's one of the things we'll do. We'll use it as a ability to say, okay, here's the concert, here's a box. If you want to donate money to our cause, you can do that. Because it's not just buying the CD, there's a lot of things, but we need people to be mobily aware of it so they can talk about it. Because that's what's going to bring it to the forefront. You know, it's not just about money, it's more about people knowing about it so that people realize it's something that needs to be done.
How much of this story had you heard? I mean, this strikes me as one of those things that, you know, your mom might not necessarily have openly said, oh, by the way, I was...
Well, we knew about it. I mean, when you're 8 years old, you think Hogan's Heroes when you think about prison of war camp. And when I got to be about 18, 19, I went to the Netherlands and Germany a lot and met my mom's friend Edith in Munich. And I said, how was it in Indonesia? I knew some stories. And I started to become more consciously aware. And then I started to, out of curiosity, just, you know, get the dates and names of everybody. But it wasn't until about 2 years ago that German television contacted me about my grandmother, because she was born in Cologne. They wanted to do a documentary. I chronologically had to write everything down. And then suddenly, there's all this information and these people. And I often thought about my grandfather traveling 3 months on the Trans-Siberia, or my grandmother on a boat 4 weeks. How was it for them? You know, and for me, flying to Argentina 24 hours or from Europe to here, I can't complain about it. You know, they had it really, really hard. And then, of course, the war years, being in a concentration camp, losing your freedom, having nothing but just rags, no shoes, having to do hard labor, living on little bits of rice every day. I mean, it's pretty heavy when you think about it. And I still, to this day, admire my mother and all the people that went through it because they have such a positive attitude now. Her brother, Dolph, who sadly passed away in '03, was the most vivacious guy you could ever want to meet. You'd never know that he was in a prisoner of war camp.
You know, and it just wasn't that long ago.
And how long did they stay in the...
They were in almost 4 years.
And what ages were they?
My mom was about 12 or 13, and her brother was 9.
Wow. And
her brother got taken away at 10 and put into a men's camp. And his father was in the government, so he was somewhere else, and he was separated.
And they got reunited?
They got reunited. It was my grandmother who, in fact, that song you play on the station, Train to Bandung, was my grandmother's... she got out of camp. They weren't released right away. The Japanese never said, you're free. The bomb dropped, and they all had heard rumors, but then about 3 or 4 weeks later, my grandmother said, there's something going on here. I'm going to leave the camp. And of course, the Japanese didn't say you can't go, but they said if you leave, you're on your own. We don't take any responsibility. And she got on a train looking for her husband and her son and said to my mother, you stay here until I come back. So then they had to leave Indonesia.
You stay here in the
camp? Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, you stay in the camp.
And she was 12?
At that time, she was 15 or 16.
Oh.
So, you know. And it took her, she took a whole day on the train, and they said, don't do it. You're taking your life into your hands. But she found her husband and her son.
How did she even know where to begin to look?
She had heard rumors that there was a place in Bandung, which is where the headquarters were situated for the Dutch. So when the Japanese took over, that's where they signed the papers. And somehow she took the train, was looking and looking and looking, and finally found her. And they were totally emaciated and had no clothing. She burned whatever they had on. And then they had to leave. December 24th, they left Batavia, which then became Jakarta, and flew back to the Netherlands. So forcefully, you know.
Wow.
Well, that's what I mean. You know, this story, we realize, you know, we complain and
You
say,
should write a book.
well, it's going to be a book. And the thing is that, you know, we all complain about today and we say we have a dangerous world, but it was much more dangerous back then.
Yeah.
And we should stop complaining, and we should do good things with things like that. Realize that by honoring these people, by giving them their dignity back and saying, your suffering was not in vain, we're doing something good for our future, because we're learning from the past, and we're hopefully reminding ourselves.
Sure.
I mean, I live in Germany, and there are documentaries on the Holocaust every day. But this has never been addressed.
Yeah.
Would there many people perish from this?
Yes,
How
yeah.
many do you think?
I don't even know the thousands, but there were men working on the railroads in Burma and also in Sumatra. My mother's best friend's father went blind because of that. He had to work on the railroads there because they were undernourished. And there was a lot of, you know, torture, mental torture and physical torture, and just, they wanted to work them to death because they realized that if they were worked to death, they wouldn't have any resistance left in them.
Wow. Talk about writing the music for this. I mean, or did it kind of write itself?
It wrote itself. I mean, you know, the documentary didn't come through because they didn't have the money or whatever, and that was fine. But suddenly there was music, and I went, well, this is interesting. So we started to record in 2009 in Argentina. Had 2 pieces. Bruce and I were down there for a festival. And I said, I've got 2 tunes, and we had a studio available to us, and we got a bandoneon player and did with a trio. And then I started writing more music, and the title track, Batavia, was something that came to me in a hotel room, and I knew it had to do with my grandmother in the story. And I always wanted to address it somehow, but I never knew. Would I do a Gamala record, or would I, you know? And this all these things started coming, and, you know, I didn't know what it would become, but it became this. And everybody that I've heard from the media and also just personally, they can all hear the stories in the music. In fact, an Indonesian woman told me that she just heard the music. She didn't read the liner notes. And she said, I could hear all these things that you were addressing. And she said, how did you do that? I said, I don't know. I felt like there were people behind me kind of, you know.
Guiding you.
Yeah, it was a very, very interesting experience. One that I've never had and probably never will have again. So.
Compare that to how you normally compose stuff. I mean, is it...
You know, you just, as a musician, you have ideas, and you just, there's a lot of nuts and bolts to it where you just think about structures and things like that. And after the fact, there may be an inspiration or there may be a title that comes from something. But these were really things where things were coming out of me where I knew this is my uncle walking in the jungle looking for his father, you know, aimlessly, and you know, or my grandmother being on the train to Bandung, or you know, there's a tune on there which is about this crazy Japanese guy. We're going to play that. It's called Metal Plate. And just the melody itself came out, and it's a very frenetic and crazy kind of swing melody, but it's what this guy was. He had a metal plate in his head, and he was the commanding officer of all of the prison camps, and the Japanese even feared him. But at the same time, when he was not around, the Dutch would make fun of him. So there's a bit of humor that they had, because that's what kept them alive, was their sense of humor.
So these stories that you have, and the music, you're getting these stories from your mom and Edith.
Yeah, and my uncle as well when he was
uncle.
around. Yeah, that was the main source for me.
Wow.
You know, and of course.
And they told you about this crazy Japanese guy.
They did. Yes, they did. Yes. His name was Sonai, and they called him Sony. And there's actually, you can find a little bit about him on the internet.
What did he do? What was his job? I mean,
he was the commanding officer of all of the concentration camps in Indonesia.
Really?
And he would run around with a bayonet and scream at everybody, even the Japanese. And
he had a metal plate in his head?
From the First World War, yeah, he had an injury. And so
they actually did that technology back in those days?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I'm not the only one, Kelly. That
No,
has one
I'm
of
just curious. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I called it metal plate. 'Cause
Yeah,
the first
right.
thing that came to mind was, well, that's this guy.
Yeah.